You're listening to Wild About Arizona, the official podcast of the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Here's your host, Michael Coliani.
When most people think of Arizona, they typically think of the Grand Canyon, big rock formations, and dry desert. But those of us who are lucky enough to call State 48 home know that this is not the case, as there are hundreds of rivers and lakes where you can enjoy recreational opportunities, including fishing. Every year, the Arizona Game and Fish Department sells hundreds of thousands of fishing licenses. And with the hottest weather of the year upon us, we've invited Chase Newlawn, our fishing recruitment, retention, and reactivation coordinator, here to tell us about some unique fishing opportunities over the summer. Thanks for joining us, Chase.
Yeah, thanks for having me, for sure.
So, Chase, if you could just start, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to join the Game and Fish Department.
Yeah, so I grew up in Colorado. I was born and raised there, and then got really into fishing right around high school. My dad kind of got me into fishing, and then moved out here, been here for about 2 years now, and I love it here. I love fishing, so obviously Game and Fish was like my number one thing that I wanted to do. I went to school for fish, wildlife, and conservation biology, so I've just always been super passionate about fishing.
So it's in the title of your major, so you might as well put it in the title of the place that you work.
Exactly.
Yeah, could you tell us, Chase, obviously there are different types of fishing out there. Do you concentrate on a particular type, and what should people know when it comes to fishing and those different opportunities?
Yeah, so I mainly focus on fly fishing. That's kind of my passion. I was a fly fishing guide back home, so that's just kind of what I typically do. But there's lots of other kinds of fishing. It's not just fly fishing. There's conventional tackle, spinning, bass fishing, trolling. I mean, we could go into a rabbit hole. There's so many different types. But here in Arizona, I'd say the two main types would be fly fishing for most of our streams and stuff like that, and then conventional tackle for most of our lakes and reservoirs.
And that's what people think of maybe when they think of fishing. Somebody with their rod and reel casting out into a lake or something like that with some bait.
Yep, exactly. So there's lots of bait fishing opportunities here. Even just as simple as a hot dog on a hook with some split shot at one of your community waters, or going to saguaro or canyon or any of those types of reservoirs and fishing there.
And what's the difference between that and fly fishing, kind of that other big interest here in the state?
So fly fishing is a lot more interactive, I guess is a good word to say. Mm-hmm. You're doing a lot more, you're more active while you're casting and stuff like that. But the main technical difference between the two is with conventional fishing, you're casting the weight of your lure or bait. And with fly fishing, you're casting the weight of the line. So you can cast a way lighter, more delicate presentation to the fish.
So yeah, it's not necessarily something that's going under the water, right? They kind of float on top for the most part, or do they have weights and things like that?
There's different kinds. So with fly fishing, you have dry flies, which is the typical what people think of with fly fishing, and that's adult insects on the top of the water. Mm-hmm. But then you can also imitate the larval stages of the insects as well. So that's when you'd go subsurface and use indicators and stuff like that.
And they're kind of also done in different kinds of water. When I picture somebody fly fishing, or you see it in a movie, it's usually somebody in some shallow water, some rubber waders on, standing out in the middle of the river, as opposed to maybe being on a boat or a dock.
Yeah, and that's actually a common misconception, is that you can fly fish anywhere. You can fly fish anywhere that you would conventional fish. It's kind of just what you prefer to do. There are instances where fly fishing is a lot more successful than conventional tackle, which is kind of what you're saying when you're in those shallow rivers, casting like in your waders and stuff like that. But you could definitely do both types of fishing almost anywhere. So like fly fishing, like you can take it to the saltwater if you wanted to. Not that we have any here.
Oh, wow.
But,
okay.
Yeah, so fly fishing you can do just about anywhere. The only instance where it's not really effective is super deep water, so 60 plus feet of water. You're not really going to be fly fishing.
So don't go out into the middle of the Pacific trying to catch some marlin or something like that.
You could catch marlin on a fly rod. I've seen it done, but it's not super common, no.
Okay, all right. That sounds fascinating. What species of fish then, can you folks be on the lookout while they're, in our lakes and streams here in Arizona?
So the most common is going to be rainbow trout, brown trout, largemouth bass, and then channel catfish. So we stock rainbow trout and channel catfish throughout the year. In the warmer months, we do channel catfish, and then in the colder months, we do rainbow trout. But those are going to be the most common fish, but there's so many different species here. You got the Apache trout, the Gila trout. We got grayling in a couple lakes. We got striped bass everywhere. So there's a bunch of different opportunities.
Right, and I understand that trout fishing is a pretty big deal in Arizona. There's trout challenges and things like that.
Yeah,
What's that about?
So we have the wild trout challenge. So we have 5 species of trout that are wild in Arizona, which just means that they're a self-sustaining population. We don't supplement them with stocking. So there's brook trout, rainbow trout, brown trout, Apache trout, and Gila trout. Those are our 5 wild trout species. So for the wild trout challenge, you have to catch all 5 of them and document where you caught them at, when you caught them, and take a picture and that sort of stuff. And then you win a cool hoodie and stuff like that. But we also have the Arizona Trout Challenge, and that one is you have to catch 6 of 8 trout species. So those are the same 5, the rainbow, brown, brook, Apache, Gila, and then we also have the grayling, cutthroat trout, and the tiger trout.
Oh, fantastic! And is that something that I know that we have some personnel here who work at Game and Fish who've completed that challenge? Yes,
there's a lot of people. I'm 1 fish away from completing that challenge right now, so I'm getting there. But yeah, it's a really cool challenge to do. It gets you out and you see a lot of different bodies of water that you wouldn't typically fish.
What fish are you hung up on right now?
Right now, I need the wild brook trout, and I've been skunked a few times after them. So I'm really close. I'm almost there. Hopefully I'll get it done this summer.
All right. Pretty elusive to you so far, but we're hoping for the best.
Yep. I hope so.
Fantastic. We all know that there are, of course, if you live in the Valley or down in Tucson, we all know that there are opportunities to fish here. But do those opportunities change once you travel to other parts of the state, perhaps in the high country, White Mountains area, things like that?
For sure. So during the summers here especially is kind of when I'm looking at moving up towards the Payson area, the White Mountains, Flagstaff, even going to Ashhurst and Lower Lake Mary and stuff like that. Weather's just typically a little bit cooler up there, so a lot of those fish are a little bit more active. That hot weather in the Valley and Tucson kind of gets those fish to be a little dormant and just a little too hot for them.
And is that just the water temperature? Just they don't like that hotter water?
Yeah, so it depends on the fish species. So like warm water fish species such as like largemouth bass, carp, they're a little bit more active when it's warmer out, but it'll still get to a point where it's just a little bit too hot. They're not quite as active. They're not feeding quite as much. But like for a trout, for example, it gets just way too hot down here for them. They're a cold water fish. They like cold water. So up in the mountains, they'll be a lot more active, moving around, feeding, that sort of stuff. So just a lot better success rates up there.
So basically you're telling me go up north and fish.
Yeah, go up north. go to the White Mountains. That's going to be the place to fish this summer. Places like Big Lake, Becker Lake, all of the streams up there, the Little Colorado River, the West Fork of the Black River. And then even on the reservation up there's so many good lakes to fish.
Is there any place in particular that you just always keep in mind, when you think about it? Don't want to give away your secrets, of course. But
one of my favorite places is the Big Lake area. So fishing at Big Lake, and then just all around Big Lake, there's so many different species that you can target. You can get the cutthroat out of Big Lake. You can get brook trout out of Big Lake. And then not too far from there, you can get Apache trout, rainbows, and browns. So there's just a lot of different species you can target in that area.
Okay. And so I understand that there is a little bit of a difference between, catch and release and harvesting, kind of just doing it, as a sport, as an activity versus maybe catching them and actually eating the fish. Do we have kind of regulations about which ones we can catch and release and which ones can be harvested?
Yeah, so in our fishing regulations, which you can find at Arizona Game and Fish, our website, it lists all the different special regulations for the different places, whether it's catch and release only, or whether you can keep fish and what the bag limits are. And so really, if you want to keep fish, that is perfectly good. Like there's this common misconception that we should all be releasing every fish that we catch. But no, like we stock a lot of fish for people to keep. Like that was the point of stocking them. Mm-hmm. So catch and release angling is a good thing when necessary, but it's not always necessary.
Right. And a lot of our community waters, they'll have placards and signs kind of guiding folks as to which types of fish they can take home and which ones need to be released.
Yep, exactly. And then another topic of when you're keeping fish, just make sure you're checking regulations, whether or not there's fish consumption advisory. So like Lyman Lake, for example, has a fish consumption advisory because there's a little bit of mercury that can build up in the fish. So just make sure you're checking that, not eating fish that you shouldn't be eating.
So do your homework.
Yes.
Before you cook it up.
Exactly.
Good advice. Chase, obviously, like we kind of alluded to earlier, there are so many fishermen in the state of Arizona, so many people with a fishing license. We just had Free Fishing Day this past Saturday, which was fantastic. But there's also a lot of people who are just beginners and are interested in kind of starting this hobby and enjoying themselves doing it. What are some maybe tips that you have for folks who haven't maybe gotten out on the water before about, expectations, equipment, anything like that? Yeah,
so the best equipment-wise, the best rod to start out with is a conventional 7-foot medium action spinning rod. It's kind of the jack of all trades. You can catch any fish on it. You can do anything with it. It's not the best at any one particular thing, but it'll work for just about everything that you're doing in Arizona. As far as getting started fishing, the Fish AZ Network, which is the program I run for the department, it's a list of events and a compilation of a bunch of different types of events to get people into fishing. So Learn to Fish events, family fishing clinics, kids fishing clinics, and they happen all across the state. So last year we did 154 different events throughout the year, so there's always something going on. But yeah, that's a great place to start to kind of meet some of those experienced anglers that can teach you how to fish. I mean, that's what they're there for. They love to do it. So
even good for perhaps folks from out of state who come here, have fished maybe up north, Wisconsin, or on the East Coast, but come here and can't get a little bit of a sense of what it's like to be fishing in Arizona.
Exactly. Like a lot of our creeks and stuff like that, they're smaller creeks, not stuff people are used to. So going to these events and learning from the people who grew up fishing them or have been fishing them for a long time can be super helpful.
Are there any questions or concerns that you get from folks when you host these events? Or there common questions that you get?
A lot of people, it's mainly just like, where do I even start? There's so many different things you can do with fishing. It's a lot of, where do I start? And honestly, just getting out there is the first step. You don't need the big fancy equipment and all this extra stuff. I mean, you just need a little bit of bait, rod, and you're good to go. So, and a fishing license.
Yes, of course, which you can, of course, get at the Arizona Game and Fish website. Just speaking of, Chase, let me bring you back to when you were a beginner.
Yeah.
Okay. And really, what is it about? Like you said, you just need simple equipment to get out there. What is it about being out there fishing that what does it do for you? I've been told it's therapeutic. I've been told
for me, it's just kind of my time to clear my head and get out there and just enjoy being outside. It's not necessarily about the fishing. Yeah, I love to fish, but it's about getting out in nature and kind of seeing different parts of the world. I mean, fishing's brought me all across the United States for the most part. So it's really just about enjoying being outside, and getting to see things you wouldn't normally see.
Just, an excuse to get outside, enjoy yourself, be in nature, get away from the hustle and bustle, right?
Exactly. And I love that it directly supports conservation. Like your license directly goes to conservation. That's kind of been my whole thing. That's why I run the program I run. It's not, at the end of the day, it's not to create more anglers. It's to promote conservation and make sure there's people who care about it still.
Right. And help not just our native fish wildlife, but all of the wildlife throughout Arizona, because there's just so many opportunities to view them and enjoy them.
Yeah.
But speaking of those opportunities, it's supposed to be 111 degrees today. We're in early June, and things don't look like they're going to be cooling off anytime soon. So what kind of opportunities are there for folks who maybe want to get out of the heat and still fish, night fishing opportunities? Once the sun goes down, what can people do?
Yeah, so like striper fishing is really popular at night. So Lake Pleasant, Lake Mead, Lake Powell, all those big chain lakes across the Colorado River, all of those have striper in them. And so fishing at night for those can be super productive, gets you out of the heat. A lot of people soak anchovies for them. So anchovies on a 3/8 ounce jig head in deep water. So they're usually anywhere from 40 to 60 feet of water, but they can even go deeper than that. So that's kind of what I would recommend for night fishing. There's also like early morning and like as the sun's setting, like that kind of time, fishing for catfish can be super productive around that time. So channel cats at all of our community waters can be super productive. Just make sure you're not out past when the park is closed.
Sure. Sort of thing. Yeah. Obey all signs, all open signs, right?
Exactly.
And well, some of those community fishing waters, I would understand, wouldn't be as deep. Is there something about just catfish's normal activity?
Yeah, so catfish are a nocturnal species, so they mainly feed at night. So it's just kind of how they function.
Right. And that's the best time to catch them moving around.
Exactly. That's when they're typically looking for food. Shrimp and hot dogs fished on the bottom at those community waters works really well. Okay. Are there,
it just seems like from what we've been discussing that there are so many different kinds of opportunities here in Arizona to fish. Is that pretty unique in your perspective?
Yeah, so I came from Colorado where it's you fish for trout, and that's all there is. Here, there's so many different species you can target. Like one that we haven't even really touched on is carp. When I first moved here, I was like, I don't want to catch carp. It's a really common misconception of people that they're kind of gross and stuff like that, but they are a really fun fish to fish for. So I started doing that once I moved here, and I've fallen in love with carp fishing. And it's so accessible. Like you can fish them in the canals. A lot of the ponds around the Phoenix area have carp in them. So,
what makes fishing for carp so unique?
They're really hard, like really hard to catch. They're really smart, and they're mainly I fly fish for them mainly. So they have barbels on the front of their face, which are essentially what they use to smell and taste things. So they swim around the bottom, kind of smelling things, picking up food. So trying to fool them with a hook full of feathers and thread on it is pretty difficult.
Not going to cut it for them.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to really outsmart them, and it just makes you an all-around better angler fishing for them because they're so spooky. So as soon as the fly hits the water, if it splashes just even a little bit too much, they're out of there. So
is there I'm just curious, since we have the Colorado River bordering our great state, are there opportunities that are maybe unique to the Colorado that you send people out on in the Lake Havasu area or places like that? Yeah,
so over there we have really big red ear sunfish. That's kind of like the main attraction over there. That would make that, I guess, the unique attraction over there. But the world record red ear sunfish was caught over there, and I can't remember the exact weight, but I think it's in the neighborhood of like 6 pounds, which is ginormous for a sunfish.
Yeah.
So I send people over there for that a lot, and then the striper fishing over there is also just incredible.
Well, Chase, is there anything else that you just feel like people need to know before they get out onto the water and once they're out there?
Make sure you have a license. It promotes conservation. It's really important. It's not just so we can go out there and give you guys tickets for not having them. It's directly supports conservation in the state of Arizona.
So you can get those fishing licenses at our website. That's azgfd.gov.
Yeah.
Well, Chase, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, have a great summer.
Thank you, too.
Thanks for listening. Visit us online at www.azgfd.gov.